She inherited a dying farm. A silent cowboy next door changed her destiny. Clara had never imagined she would inherit a farm. She had spent her whole life in the city, surrounded by tall buildings, busy streets, and the constant hum of machines. The only dirt she saw was the small potted plants on her apartment balcony, and the only animals she met regularly were pigeons and squirrels. But one chilly morning, a letter arrived that changed everything. The letter was formal and short. Her name printed in bold at the top, the signature of some distant lawyer at the bottom. It told her that her aunt, whom she had barely known, had passed away and left her a farm on the outskirts of a colony planet. Clara blinked at the words, rereading the page. A farm. On another planet. She felt a strange mix of disbelief, excitement, and worry. She had never traveled much, and the idea of managing a farm seemed impossible, but something in her heart stirred. Perhaps this was the chance to escape her monotonous life, to do something different, something meaningful. So, she packed her few belongings and boarded a small transport shuttle bound for the colony. The journey was long and full of silence. Clara stared out of the tiny window as planets and stars drifted past. The city felt like a memory, and the farm, though she didn't yet know it, was about to become her entire world. When she finally arrived, the farm was nothing like the pictures she had seen in the lawyer's file. The land stretched wide, rolling fields that had once been green but now were dry and patchy. The farmhouse itself was small, wooden, and weathered. Paint peeled from the walls and the roof sagged in places. Broken tools lay scattered in the yard, and the wind carried a faint smell of dust and old earth. Clara stepped out of the shuttle, taking in the scene. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed. This was not the farm she had imagined in her dreams. This was a challenge, a puzzle she would need to solve. She took a deep breath and walked toward the front door, keys trembling in her hand. Inside, the house was quiet, almost too quiet. Dust covered the furniture, and the air smelled faintly of old wood and forgotten years. But it had character. It had history. Clara could almost hear the echoes of laughter and chatter from the family who had lived here before. She ran her hand along the edge of the worn wooden table and felt a strange connection to this place. That evening, Clara wandered outside to explore the farm. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the land. Rows of neglected fields stretched to the horizon, and the trees at the edge of the property swayed gently in the wind. In the distance, she noticed something moving, a figure on horseback, silent and steady, riding along a nearby ridge. He was tall, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a long coat that fluttered in the wind. He didn't wave or speak, just watched her from afar before disappearing behind a hill. Clara blinked, unsure if she had imagined him, but something about the way he moved, calm and deliberate, left a strange impression on her. She felt that somehow he belonged here. The next morning, Clara started exploring her new responsibilities. She had read a few books on farming during the shuttle ride, but theory was very different from reality. The soil was dry and cracked, the irrigation system broken, and she had no idea how to care for the old crops that struggled to survive. She tried turning the soil with an ancient plow, but it was heavy and uncooperative. The farm felt bigger and harder than she had ever imagined. She sat on the porch, exhausted, watching the sunrise paint the sky in streaks of orange and pink. That's when she noticed the cowboy again. He was near the edge of the property, just standing, looking out over the land. This time she waved. He didn't wave back, he didn't speak. He just tipped his hat slightly and disappeared into the morning mist. Clara laughed softly to herself. "Who is this guy?" she whispered. It felt almost magical that someone else lived nearby, someone who seemed connected to the land in a way she couldn't yet understand. She decided she would find out, but not today. Today, she had a farm to start saving. Her first days were difficult. She worked from sunrise to sunset, fixing broken fences, clearing old debris, and trying to bring some life back to the soil. Each task felt exhausting, and each day ended with her body aching and her mind full of doubts. Could she really do this? Was she strong enough, smart enough, patient enough? But Clara also noticed small victories. A patch of stubborn grass began to grow. A flock of birds returned to the nearby trees. The wind carried the faint scent of freshness across the fields. She realized that even small progress mattered. Even tiny signs of life were proof that the farm could survive. One afternoon, while she was repairing a water trough, she saw the cowboy again. This time, he left something near the edge of her field, a small bundle of seeds. Clara stared at them in surprise. They were unlike anything she had seen before, small and shiny. There was no note, no explanation, just the seeds. Curiosity pushed her forward. She planted them in a small patch of the field. To her astonishment, they began to sprout within days. The plants were hardy and green, thriving even in the dry soil. Clara felt a rush of hope. Perhaps the cowboy was trying to teach her something. Perhaps this farm was not as doomed as it seemed. Evenings became her favorite time. She would sit on the porch, watch the sunset, and sometimes glimpse the cowboy riding along the ridge. He never came close, never spoke a word, yet his presence felt reassuring. She began to understand that he was part of this land, and now, in a strange way, so was she. As the week passed, Clara started to make the farm her own. She repaired broken fences with careful hands, cleaned the barn, and learned how to store water for dry days. She discovered joy in small tasks: the smell of fresh soil, the sound of the wind through the trees, the gentle clucking of chickens she had brought from the colony market. But the work was not easy. Nights were long, and sometimes she felt utterly alone. The city life she had known seemed like a distant memory, almost unreal. Yet with every challenge, Clara grew stronger. She discovered patience she hadn't known she had, creativity she didn't realize she possessed, and a stubborn determination that pushed her forward. One night as she sat by the fireplace, she reflected on the strange gift of the farm. It was more than land. It was a test, a chance to grow in ways she had never imagined. And somewhere beyond the hills, the silent cowboy watched, guiding her in his quiet, unspoken way. By the end of the first month, the farm looked different. Not perfect, not fully alive, but full of potential. Clara could see the faint green shoots of plants across the field, hear the return of birds, and feel the energy of a place slowly waking up. She smiled to herself. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: she belonged here. And maybe, just maybe, the cowboy next door would help her discover how to turn this dying farm into something extraordinary. Clara woke up to the soft light of dawn filtering through the thin curtains of the farmhouse. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint scent of earth and plants. For the first time, she felt a quiet excitement about the day ahead. The farm was no longer just a place of work, it was a place of possibilities. Her first task that morning was to check the newly planted seeds that the silent cowboy had left for her. She had never seen seeds like them before, small, shiny, almost glowing in the morning light. Kneeling in the soil, she gently touched the earth and smiled. Tiny green shoots had already begun to peek out. Her heart lifted. "This is amazing," she whispered to herself. "I've never seen anything grow this fast." Clara realized she needed to understand more about these plants. Were they native to the colony? Did they need special care? She decided to explore the nearby ridge where the cowboy often appeared. Perhaps there was something she could learn from the land itself. She packed a small bag with water, a notebook, and a few tools, and set off toward the ridge. The ground was uneven, dotted with stones and old roots. Clara stumbled a few times but kept going. The farther she walked, the more she noticed small details. How the sunlight hit the leaves, how the soil smelled richer near certain rocks, and how small streams of water trickled through hidden channels. When she reached the top of the ridge, she saw him again, the cowboy. He was sitting on a wooden fence post, watching over the fields. His horse grazed quietly nearby. He didn't wave or nod, but for some reason Clara felt he had been expecting her. "Hello," she called out softly. I wanted to thank you for the seeds. They're growing beautifully." The cowboy tilted his head slightly but did not speak. Instead, he gestured with his hand toward a small patch of fertile soil nearby. Clara understood. She walked over and knelt beside it. The soil was dark and soft, unlike the dry earth in most of her fields. She ran her fingers through it, feeling the moisture and richness. She realized then that the cowboy was teaching her through example. He did not speak, but he showed her what to look for, how to read the land. Every gesture, every small action carried meaning. Clara felt a deep sense of respect for him. Here was someone who had mastered this land, who understood its secrets without saying a word. Over the next few days, Clara tried to follow the cowboy's silent instructions. She moved old stones to create small terraces, dug channels to guide water to dry areas, and planted seeds in patches of soil he had indicated. At first, she made mistakes. She placed seeds too close together, dug holes in the wrong spots, and even accidentally crushed a few young sprouts. But the cowboy never seemed upset. He simply observed as if to say, "Learn from this. Keep going." One afternoon, a sudden windstorm swept across the fields. Dust rose in thick clouds and Clara struggled to protect her fragile plants. The wind tore at the young shoots, bending them dangerously. She felt a wave of panic. If these plants failed, the first progress she had made would be gone. Then she saw the cowboy moving across the field, seemingly without effort. He secured a few plants with small stakes and tied them gently. Clara rushed to help him, and together they worked quickly, the storm whipping around them. Even without words, she felt connected to him in a new way. They were a team. When the storm passed, Clara looked at the field. Most of the young plants had survived, standing taller and stronger. She turned to the cowboy to thank him, but he was already gone, leaving only a small pile of stones arranged neatly on the ground. Clara smiled, realizing it was his way of saying, "You did well." Days turned into weeks. Clara's confidence grew. She learned to listen to the land, to notice subtle signs of moisture, sunlight, and soil health. She began to experiment, combining her city knowledge with the cowboy's old techniques. She invented simple irrigation systems, built protective coverings for delicate plants, and even tried small composting methods to enrich the soil. All the while, the cowboy remained nearby, silent but present. Sometimes she would catch him watching from a distance, and sometimes she would find small gifts he left for her, tools, seeds, or even a carved wooden figure of a horse. Clara didn't know his name, or why he had chosen to live this way, but she felt grateful for his guidance. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara sat on the porch and looked at the fields. The plants she had nurtured were growing taller, stronger, and greener. Birds had returned, chirping in the trees, and small animals cautiously explored the area. The farm was beginning to feel alive again. The cowboy appeared on the ridge one last time that evening, silhouetted against the orange sky. Clara waved, and this time he nodded slightly. She felt a strange warmth in her chest, a feeling that she was not alone in this journey, that the farm was not just her responsibility, but a shared adventure. The next morning, Clara received a small surprise. She had been exploring the barn when she discovered a hidden storage area filled with old farming manuals, sketches of irrigation systems, and journals left by previous owners. It was a treasure trove of knowledge. She realized the cowboy had likely known about this all along, perhaps waiting for her to be ready to use it. With the help of the manuals, Clara began learning faster. She experimented with crop rotation, mixed planting, and natural pest control. She observed how plants reacted to sunlight and water, and she kept detailed notes. Every day brought new lessons, and every day she grew more confident. The cowboy continued to teach her silently. One morning she noticed him near a grove of trees, pointing toward a cluster of wild herbs. Clara approached carefully, kneeling beside the plants. She recognized some of them from the manuals. They were useful for both cooking and soil enrichment. She carefully collected seeds, knowing they would thrive when planted with care. Over time, Clara realized that the cowboy's teaching was not just about farming. It was about patience, observation, and respect for the land. He had learned these lessons over decades, and now he was passing them on in the only way he knew how. Clara felt a deep appreciation for his wisdom. Her connection to the farm deepened. She no longer saw it as a lonely, struggling place. She saw potential, life, and beauty. The fields that had once seemed hopeless were now filled with promise. Even the farmhouse, with its peeling paint and sagging roof, began to feel like home. One afternoon, Clara was walking along a small creek that ran through the property when she heard a faint humming. She looked around and saw the cowboy tending to a small patch of wildflowers. He paused and smiled faintly when he saw her. Clara felt a surge of joy. For the first time, she realized that the farm was not just about growing plants, it was about growing herself too. That evening, as she prepared a simple meal, Clara reflected on everything that had happened since she arrived. The farm was no longer a burden. It was a challenge, yes, but also a gift. She had learned to work with the land, to listen to its needs, and to trust herself. And though the cowboy had never spoken a word to her, she felt his guidance in everything she did. Clara went to bed that night with a sense of hope and determination. She knew the journey ahead would be long and full of challenges, but she was ready. She had a farm to save, a land to nurture, and a silent teacher who believed in her. For the first time in her life, Clara felt that she was exactly where she was meant to be. And somewhere beyond the hills, the cowboy watched quietly, knowing that his student was learning to become more than just a farmer. She was learning to be a guardian of the land, a part of the endless cycle of growth and life. The days continued, each one filled with work, discovery, and quiet victories. Clara felt the land responding to her care, and she knew that this was only the beginning. She had inherited more than a farm. She had inherited a future, one that she would shape with patience, courage, and human ingenuity. And through it all, the cowboy remained her silent companion, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful lessons are taught without words. Clara woke to a gentle light spilling across the farmhouse. Birds chirped in the trees, and a soft breeze carried the scent of fresh earth and growing plants. For the first time, she felt truly connected to this land. The farm was no longer just a challenge. It was a living, breathing part of her life. Her first task that morning was to inspect the young crops. The seeds the cowboy had given her had grown strong and green. Rows of sprouts reached toward the sky, bending slightly in the breeze. Clara smiled, kneeling to touch the leaves. They were healthy, thriving, and full of life. For the first time, she felt she could really make this farm succeed. As she worked, her mind wandered to the cowboy. He had been a constant presence in her life, silently guiding her with gestures, small gifts, and subtle signs. She had learned to read the land through his eyes, to observe carefully, and to act patiently. He had taught her that farming was not just about effort. It was about understanding, intuition, and respect. Today, she decided to explore a part of the farm she had neglected. There was a small hill at the edge of the property, hidden behind overgrown bushes and fallen trees. Clara had always assumed it was just a rocky rise, useless for farming, but something told her it might hold secrets. She packed a small bag with water, her notebook, and tools and set off toward the hill. The path was difficult. Thorns scratched her arms and roots threatened to trip her. She pushed forward, determined to see what lay beyond. When she reached the top, she gasped. Below her, hidden from view, was a small valley. In the center, water shimmered in a natural pond, surrounded by rich, dark soil. The area was untouched, vibrant, and full of potential. Clara's heart raced. She had discovered something incredible. This could change everything. she whispered to herself. She spent the next few days exploring the valley. She tested the soil, noting its fertility. She measured the water from the pond, realizing it could support her entire farm if used wisely. She even discovered small wild herbs growing naturally, useful for cooking and soil enrichment. It was a hidden treasure, a secret resource that could transform her farm. The cowboy appeared at the ridge one evening as she worked in the valley. He watched silently, his eyes scanning the land. Clara felt a strange mixture of pride and nervousness. Had she done something wrong, or had she done something right? The cowboy's answer came in the form of a simple gesture. He pointed toward the pond, then drew a circle in the air with his finger. Clara understood immediately. He was teaching her about irrigation, about using natural resources wisely. He wanted her to learn to work with the land, not against it. Inspired, Clara began designing small channels to bring water from the pond to the surrounding fields. She calculated angles, studied the flow of water, and built tiny canals using stones and soil. At first, some channels failed. The water pooled in the wrong places or seeped into cracks in the earth. But she learned from each mistake, adjusting her plans, experimenting, and observing the results. By the end of the week, water flowed gently through her new system, nourishing the fields. The plants responded immediately, leaves turning greener, stems standing taller, and roots digging deeper into the fertile soil. Clara felt a surge of joy. She had not just discovered a secret of the land, she had harnessed it, combining human ingenuity with the natural gifts of the farm. The next day, she decided to test another idea. She remembered the old manuals she had found in the barn and began experimenting with crop rotation. She planted different seeds together, mixing vegetables and herbs in ways that would enrich the soil naturally. She used compost made from leftover plant material and carefully observed the effects. Each day brought small successes and minor failures, but Clara learned quickly. Throughout it all, the cowboy remained a silent guide. Sometimes he appeared at the edge of her fields, sometimes near the pond, always watching, always teaching without speaking. Clara began to understand him in a way she could not explain. He represented patience, wisdom, and a deep connection to the land. Through his guidance, she learned that farming was not just labor, it was understanding, observation, and care. One evening, as the sun set, Clara noticed something unusual near the pond. The water reflected a faint shimmer, almost like a hidden glow beneath the surface. Curious, she knelt to examine it. Using a small net, she carefully explored the pond and discovered a cluster of small, smooth stones that radiated warmth. They were unlike anything she had seen. Clara remembered the cowboy's gesture, the circle he had drawn in the air, and realized these stones might be connected to the land's natural energy. She arranged them carefully, placing them near young plants and along the irrigation channels. To her amazement, the plants responded immediately, growing faster and stronger. It was as if the land itself was rewarding her care and understanding. Over the next few days, Clara experimented with the stones, learning how to use them to enhance growth without forcing it. She kept careful notes, drawing diagrams in her notebook and measuring results. Each success brought a deeper sense of connection to the land. She realized that farming was not just about planting seeds. It was about understanding the world around her, observing patterns, and working with nature rather than against it. The cowboy watched quietly from the ridge. One morning, Clara saw him dismount and approach her for the first time. He handed her a small wooden tool, carved with care. It was simple, yet perfectly suited for planting seeds. Clara took it with gratitude, understanding that this was more than a gift, it was a symbol of trust. "You're ready," she whispered, even though he did not speak. The cowboy nodded slightly and returned to the ridge, leaving Clara with a feeling of accomplishment and responsibility. Clara's confidence soared. She began teaching herself new techniques, experimenting with companion planting, natural pest control, and soil enrichment. She combined the knowledge from the manuals, her observations, and the lessons from the cowboy. Each day brought new discoveries, and the farm responded with abundance. Small shoots turned into healthy plants, flowers bloomed, and the air buzzed with life. Word of her success began to spread quietly through the colony. Travelers passing by noticed the thriving farm, and neighbors who had long given up on the land watched in amazement. Clara realized that her work was not just transforming the farm, it was inspiring others. People began asking her questions, curious about how she had revived the soil and nurtured the crops. She shared her knowledge freely, happy to help, and felt a deep sense of connection to her community. One afternoon, while resting under a tree, Clara noticed a small figure approaching. It was a young boy from a nearby settlement. He carried a basket of wild herbs and shyly asked if he could learn from her. Clara smiled warmly. "Of course," she said. "There's enough for all of us to learn together." The boy stayed for hours, helping her water the plants and observing her techniques. Clara felt a sense of pride and joy. The farm was no longer hers alone. It was a place of learning, growth, and collaboration. And through it all, the cowboy remained a silent presence, guiding her indirectly, teaching her that the greatest lessons often came from patience and observation. As the sun set, Clara stood on the ridge overlooking her fields. The valley below was alive, vibrant, and full of promise. She thought about how far she had come, from a city dweller overwhelmed by a dying farm to someone who could read the land, harness its energy, and nurture life. She realized that the farm had changed her as much as she had changed it. Somewhere beyond the hills, the cowboy watched quietly, satisfied that Clara had learned the most important lesson of all, that humans had the power to understand, nurture, and restore the world around them. And for the first time, Clara felt that she was not just surviving on this land. She was thriving, growing alongside it, and preparing for the even greater challenges and discoveries that lay ahead. The awakening had begun. Clara woke early, as she had every day since arriving at the farm. The air was cool and crisp, and the sun had not yet begun to warm the fields. She walked to the edge of her land, observing the crops. They had grown taller, greener, and stronger than ever before. Even the soil seemed to hum with energy, responding to the care and attention she had given it. The cowboy was there too, standing silently on the ridge. He had become a familiar part of her mornings, a quiet guide, always present but never intrusive. Clara wondered again about his life, about who he really was. There was something deeper about him, something she could not yet understand. That day, she decided to approach him. She climbed the ridge carefully, her heart beating faster with each step. When she reached the top, she found him waiting, not with a gesture or a gift this time, but simply standing tall, watching the horizon. "I have to ask," Clara began softly, "who are you? Why do you live here all alone?" The cowboy did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked slowly toward an old cabin nestled behind the ridge. Clara followed him, curious. The cabin was simple, small, and filled with the smell of wood and earth. Inside, the walls were lined with shelves of books, sketches, and journals. There were tools everywhere, carefully arranged. It was a workspace, a library, and a laboratory all in one. He handed Clara one of the journals. She opened it carefully and began reading. The pages were filled with diagrams, notes about irrigation systems, soil fertility, and plant growth. But as she read further, she discovered something unexpected. The cowboy had once been an agricultural engineer, one of the first humans sent to the colony to help transform the barren land into thriving farmland. Clara's eyes widened. You were part of the original team," she whispered. The cowboy nodded, finally breaking the silence. "I wanted to help, to teach, to restore balance," he said quietly. "But I left the settlements because I realized people were forgetting the land. They wanted quick results, not care. I stayed here to understand it, to learn from it, and to guide anyone willing to listen." Clara felt a mixture of awe and gratitude. She had been learning from someone who had devoted his life to understanding the land, someone who had once shaped the colony itself. It made her feel small, yet inspired. I'm glad I met you," Clara said softly. "I've learned so much. I never thought I could do all this on my own." "You didn't," he replied. "The land teaches all who listen. You had patience, curiosity, and courage. That is why it responds to you." As Clara absorbed this revelation, she realized that the cowboys' lessons were not just about farming. They were about life, about understanding the world, and about human potential. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. But just as she was beginning to feel completely at peace, a new challenge appeared. A group of colony representatives arrived at the farm. They were curious about the sudden success of Clara's land. Rumors of her thriving crops had spread, and now officials from the colony wanted to inspect the farm. Clara greeted them politely. They were friendly enough, but their intentions were clear. They were looking for ways to industrialize the land, to turn it into a production site that would prioritize profit over sustainability. They admired her work but spoke of machinery, chemicals, and mass production. Clara's heart sank. She knew that her methods were different. She valued balance, patience, and care for the land. She did not want it turned into a machine. "I appreciate your interest," Clara said carefully, "but this land is more than just crops. It is alive. It needs care, attention, and understanding. I cannot allow it to be treated like a factory." The representatives frowned but listened. They did not argue violently or aggressively, but Clara could sense their determination. This was her farm, her responsibility, and she would need to find a way to protect it. She turned to the cowboy for advice. He did not speak, but he pointed toward the hidden valley and the pond. Clara understood immediately. They would need to demonstrate the value of sustainable farming, showing that careful, thoughtful methods could produce abundant results without harming the land. Over the next few days, Clara prepared her demonstration. She organized her fields, showing the growth of the crops, the use of natural irrigation, and the healthy soil enriched by compost and careful planting. She documented her methods in clear diagrams and notes, explaining how each step worked with the land's natural rhythms. The representatives returned to observe. Clara led them through the valley, showing them the thriving pond, the flourishing crops, and the healthy ecosystem of plants, birds, and insects. She explained her methods, combining lessons from the manuals, her observations, and the cowboys' guidance. To her relief, the representatives were impressed. They had expected a small, struggling farm, but what they saw was a thriving, sustainable system. They asked questions, and Clara answered honestly and patiently. She demonstrated that human care, creativity, and respect for nature could achieve results even better than machines. The cowboy watched silently from a distance, nodding faintly. Clara felt a deep sense of pride. She had not only revived the farm, but had also shown that humans could work with the land thoughtfully and successfully. By the end of the day, the representatives left with new respect. They did not force industrialization or machinery onto the farm. Instead, they took notes, promised to share Clara's methods with other settlers, and left with a renewed understanding of sustainable farming. That evening, Clara reflected on everything that had happened. She realized that her journey was more than just about reviving the farm. It was about proving that humans could adapt, innovate, and care for the world around them. The cowboys' teachings had helped her not only grow plants, but also demonstrate the potential of human ingenuity and ethics. For the first time, Clara felt that the farm was not just a personal project. It was a symbol of hope. It represented what humans could achieve when they combined intelligence, patience, and respect for nature. And she knew that the cowboy's wisdom had been essential to this transformation. Days passed, and the farm continued to thrive. Clara experimented with new planting techniques, tested natural fertilizers, and even began exploring small-scale greenhouses to extend the growing season. Each success reinforced her confidence. Each challenge taught her a new lesson. One afternoon, while walking along the ridge, Clara turned to the cowboy. "I think I understand now," she said. "It's not just about farming. It's about patience, respect, and learning from the world around us. Humans have the power to change things, but we must do it thoughtfully." The cowboy nodded, a small smile on his face. He had finally spoken, not in words but in approval and pride. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, knowing that she had earned his respect and trust. As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Clara stood on the ridge overlooking her fields. The farm was alive, vibrant, and full of promise. She thought about the future, about new crops, new methods, and new settlers who could learn from her. She realized that this was only the beginning. Somewhere beyond the hills, the cowboy watched quietly, satisfied that Clara had grown into her role as a caretaker, innovator, and human example. He had guided her to understand the land, to respect it, and to prove that human ingenuity could work in harmony with nature. And for the first time, Clara felt truly confident. She knew she had the skills, the knowledge, and the determination to protect the farm and help others do the same. The revelation of the cowboy's past had strengthened her, and the challenge from the representatives had tested her resolve. She had succeeded without compromise, showing that humans could thrive without harming the world around them. The farm was no longer just inherited, it was earned, nurtured, and transformed. And Clara, with the silent cowboy by her side, was ready for whatever the future might bring. The colony had taken notice, and word of the farm's success spread quietly. People began to visit, curious to see what Clara had achieved. She welcomed them, shared her knowledge, and demonstrated that humans could be both innovative and respectful. Through it all, the cowboy remained a steady presence, a reminder that true wisdom often came from patience, observation, and quiet guidance. Clara had learned this lesson well, and she felt ready for the next stage of her journey. The land, once dying, now thrived. And Clara knew that as long as humans approached it with care, creativity, and understanding, it would continue to flourish for generations to come. The first light of dawn stretched across the farm, painting the fields with gold. Clara stepped outside the farmhouse, taking a deep breath of crisp morning air. The farm had changed so much since she first arrived. Where once there had been cracked soil and dying plants, now there was life, green, strong, and vibrant. Birds sang from the trees, insects hummed among the flowers, and the soft rustle of leaves filled the air. Clara walked along the irrigation channels she had built. Water flowed gently from the hidden pond, nourishing every row of crops. She ran her fingers along the soil, feeling the warmth and energy that came from careful tending and respect for the land. It was hard work, yes, but it was also joy, and Clara felt proud of every small victory. The cowboy appeared on the ridge as usual, watching her with a calm, quiet presence. Clara waved, and he tipped his hat. It had become a ritual of sorts, a silent greeting that reminded her she was never truly alone. She thought of how far she had come, from a city dweller overwhelmed by a dying farm to a confident caretaker who could read the land, nurture it, and coax life from even the most stubborn soil. But Clara knew the farm was not just for her. It was a living example of what humans could achieve when they worked with patience, intelligence, and care. She wanted others to learn, to grow, and to share in the joy of restoring the land. That morning, she welcomed her first group of settlers. They were curious neighbors, intrigued by the thriving farm and eager to learn from her methods. Clara greeted them warmly, her heart swelling with pride and hope. She showed them the irrigation channels, the fertile valley, and the thriving crops. She explained the planting techniques, crop rotation, and natural fertilizers that had revived the land. The settlers watched in awe as Clara demonstrated how even small changes could produce extraordinary results. She encouraged them to ask questions, to experiment, and to learn from their own observations. Her farm had become a classroom, a model of sustainable human ingenuity. The cowboy watched from a distance, his expression unreadable but approving. He had taught her the lessons, but now it was Clara who guided others. She realized that teaching was another form of renewal, passing knowledge from one human to another, ensuring that care, patience, and respect for the land would continue beyond her own work. Weeks passed, and the farm continued to grow. Clara introduced new crops, experimented with companion planting, and even built small greenhouses to extend the growing season. The settlers she had welcomed began implementing her methods in their own fields, inspired by the success they saw. The colony slowly began to shift toward sustainability, demonstrating that humans could thrive without exploiting nature. One afternoon, Clara walked to the hidden valley, where the pond reflected the sky like a mirror. The plants around it were taller than she had ever seen, their leaves vibrant and healthy. She noticed small groups of settlers working nearby, carefully planting, watering, and observing. The farm had become a hub of community, learning, and growth. The cowboy appeared quietly on the ridge. This time he dismounted and walked toward her. He handed Clara a small carved wooden box. Inside were seeds, unlike any she had seen, tiny, glowing, and full of potential. Clara understood immediately. This was a gift, a symbol of trust and partnership, and an encouragement to continue expanding the farm's possibilities. "Thank you," Clara said softly, even though she knew he might not answer. He only nodded, a faint smile on his face. In that moment, Clara realized that the cowboy had been preparing her for more than just farming. He had been teaching her resilience, creativity, and the power of human potential. She had learned that humans could not only survive in challenging environments, but could also transform them into thriving ecosystems with patience and care. Clara decided to plant the new seeds in the hidden valley. She carefully prepared the soil, built small terraces, and arranged the irrigation channels to carry water evenly. As she planted each seed, she felt a sense of connection to the land, to the cowboy, and to the humans who would benefit from this work. Days later, the seeds sprouted quickly, showing signs of extraordinary growth. Clara marveled at their resilience. The settlers who had come to learn watched with awe, inspired by the results. The farm had become a living demonstration of human ingenuity, patience, and collaboration. Clara also began documenting everything she had learned over the past months. She wrote down the methods, observations, and lessons, creating manuals that could be shared with other settlers. She wanted the knowledge to extend beyond her farm, to help humans everywhere work in harmony with their environments. As the seasons changed, the farm flourished. Crops grew in abundance, flowers bloomed across the fields, and the soil remained rich and fertile. Clara felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had inherited a dying farm, and through care, patience, and creativity, she had transformed it into a thriving ecosystem. The cowboy remained a constant presence, though he spoke rarely. His lessons had been subtle, his guidance quiet, but they had shaped Clara in profound ways. She understood now that true teaching was not always loud or direct. Sometimes it was in the small gestures, the examples, and the shared connection with the world around you. One evening, as the sun set in shades of gold and pink, Clara stood on the ridge overlooking the farm. The settlers worked below, tending to the fields, planting new crops and learning from her example. Birds soared overhead, and the gentle hum of life filled the air. The farm was alive, vibrant, and full of promise. Clara thought of her journey, from a city dweller unsure of herself to a confident farmer, teacher, and innovator. She had discovered human resilience, ingenuity, and the ability to work with the world rather than against it. She had seen the land respond to care, creativity, and patience, proving that humans could achieve great things without harm or destruction. The cowboy approached quietly, his hat tilted against the fading sunlight. For the first time, he spoke clearly. "You have done well," he said simply. "You have grown with the land and the land has grown with you." Clara smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. "Your lessons, they taught me more than just farming. They taught me how to think, observe, and care." "Humans can do amazing things when we try," the cowboy nodded. "And now others will learn from you. The farm will continue to grow, not just here but across the colony. You have become a teacher, a guide, and a guardian of the land." Clara felt a swell of pride. She had inherited a dying farm, and she had transformed it into a beacon of hope, learning, and growth. She had discovered the power of human resilience, creativity, and collaboration, and she knew that the best was yet to come. The settlers gathered around her, curious and eager to learn. Clara shared her knowledge, teaching them the secrets of irrigation, soil care, crop rotation, and plant growth. She demonstrated patience, observation, and respect for the land, showing them that humans could thrive in harmony with nature. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the farm continued to flourish. The settlers began applying what they had learned to their own lands, creating a ripple effect of growth and renewal across the colony. Clara watched with pride as humans worked together, inspired by her example and the silent lessons of the cowboy. One morning, Clara found a small note left at the edge of her field. It was simple, written in careful handwriting. "The land will thrive as long as humans care. Teach them well." Clara smiled, realizing that the cowboy had left this message for her to pass on. She had learned, she had taught, and now the cycle of learning and growth would continue. As the sun rose over the fields, Clara stood tall, looking at the thriving farm. She knew that the journey had not ended, it had only just begun. The land was alive, the settlers were learning, and humans had proven their ability to innovate, adapt, and care for the world around them. Somewhere on the ridge, the cowboy watched silently, satisfied that Clara had fulfilled her role. The farm was no longer just a piece of land. It was a symbol of human potential, resilience, and creativity. And Clara knew that as long as humans continued to observe, care, and work with patience, the future was bright. The farm had been renewed, the community had been inspired, and the land would continue to flourish for generations to come. Clara smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She had inherited a dying farm, and now she had transformed it into a living legacy. The silent cowboy beside her had taught her the most important lesson of all. Humans could change the world, not through force, but through care, creativity, and understanding. The farm thrived, the settlers learned, and humanity's light shone brightly across the colony. And as Clara tended the fields, she knew that she had discovered the true power of human potential, hope, ingenuity, and the quiet strength to nurture life wherever it may be found. The farm was alive, and so was Clara's spirit. Together, they would continue to grow, to learn, and to inspire, showing that humans could face any challenge, overcome any obstacle, and transform even the most forgotten land into something extraordinary.